A very good afternoon to all of you. I welcome you all to season number 2 of ICF Sunday webinar series. Today's session number 9. The topic for today's persuasive writing. The speaker for today is Christa Bedwin from Canada. She is an international science editor and writer, and she has freelance and in-house experience with education and trade publishers, industry, government, and academia. Over to you, Christa.
Okay, so welcome to the talk. As Vivek said, I am from Canada, but I will do this session from a Canadian point, but also with some international points. So the first thing is that this cat is trying to persuade you of something. And many people think that cats are a bit devious because they are so good at convincing humans to do things. And so I wonder what she's trying to persuade you of. So I'll take a break while you think about that and tell you the table of contents for today. So we're going to discuss persuasion, how you can do that more simply, and different cultures get persuaded in different ways. And I think it would be interesting if people want to mention in the chat, and we can talk at the end about how you might find things are different in how I show in Canada or Europe compared to how things are presented or how people are persuaded in India. It's really interesting for me too. So if you want to say things in the chat in a couple of places, I will take pauses and be happy to hear from you also. We'll talk about how science works with social media. With two topics, global warming and the pandemic are really interesting. And again, I'm sure it's different in different countries, different ways things are presented. And then we'll talk about plain language, which is also like simplicity. Simple is easier. So this presentation, this is the third time I presented this, slightly different. The first time I gave it was at the University of British Columbia, focused on Earth, environmental, and geographic people. And that YouTube video is free if you want to look at it. You can find it through my webpage or through the University of British Columbia page. Then I gave it to the Plain Language Association in Canada in both English and French. We talked about it. Of course, French is a more complicated language than English, so it's interesting to look at how we can clarify in both languages. And now I'm giving it to you. So the cat was trying to persuade you to take notes. And the only thing that she was doing is looking at the pencil. And if you know any cats, you know that all they have to do really is look at something and you can be persuaded. And smart leaders also persuade people this way, just by their body language, just by looking at somebody. I mean, you probably know if you're in a group of people, like in a boardroom where everybody's being quiet, you can convince everybody that the person is important just by looking at them, just by where you put your attention is giving a big message already. So humans can be like cats, and we can find tricky ways to persuade people without saying anything, with plain language and with clear nonverbal messages and design messages as well. So the way we persuade, the way we use color, the way we use the layout on the page, it gives a lot of messages just like animals do. So if we aren't paying attention to that as editors, if we aren't calling, if we're editing a document and it's in bright red and it's supposed to be soothing, then we need to say this may alarm people. If it looks like an emergency document, but it's supposed to be calming, then we as editors have to speak up about that. So another way that as humans we persuade is we always are trying to use facts to persuade people. And one thing about this was actually the article that the pencil came from. This is from Forbes magazine. And so I know a lot of people in North America would find that a credible source. So if you want to persuade people, having a credible source is a good way to begin. And so just by using letters after your name or a big important biography at the beginning, some people will be more persuaded. And then, of course, another one that's a favorite of editors at the bottom paragraph here, a study by Pam Mueller of Princeton University shows that recall of presentation material is lower when note takers just use their laptops instead of a pen and paper. So I hope that you have a pen and paper for your presentations to take some notes. It's better than just typing. So now I'm going to give a little sketch here. My cat is going to help. Again, about persuasion, which isn't always about words, but is also about words. So you need to think carefully about the best approach for each situation. So here, my cat and I are a business team. You can see we're looking very businesslike. So if you're in some cultures, for example, where I come from, people really value a direct gaze. So if you want to do business with anybody, they want to have a firm handshake and they want you to look them straight in the eye. But then I've heard in Japan, you should look down. You shouldn't be looking straight in people's eyes, or they find that confrontational. And I also have learned over my career, the first job interview I had as a school teacher was on an Indigenous reserve in northern Canada. And I thought that the whole committee, there was about 12 or 15 people who interviewed me, and I was sure, I was 24 years old, and I thought they must hate me because none of them looked me in the eye the entire interview. Everybody was looking at the table. And I thought that for sure they didn't like me at all. I was very surprised the next day to get a phone call to say that I was the favorite candidate and I was the only one that they would have because I was completely misunderstood the culture. So I since have learned a lot more and worked on Indigenous reserves, which I love actually, but they didn't convince me I wanted to work there. So I didn't take that job because I felt for my culture, that was unfriendly not to look at me in the eye or shake my hand. So it's interesting to see different ways to be persuaded. So luckily in Canada, and anybody who's outside Canada too, we have this fantastic course and it's free about Indigenous Canada. Anybody can sign up. It's just videos. So you can just listen to the videos and watch the videos. It's pretty interesting. So I tell everybody in Canada, if they want to be working anywhere, they should probably take this course to understand the culture better and not be as ignorant as I was when I was young and walked into that job interview and I didn't know. So I would be interested to hear if there's different traditions around India that people do different things to persuade too. Now, here we go back to the body language. So again, it depends how people interpret you, even within the same culture. They always say every different business place has a different culture. So this cranky Mose here on the left, he says, I feel concerned that this team is not focused on the same idea because we're looking in different directions. So you can think sometimes business teams seem to be presenting that. If you're trying to present to a client and one person is saying, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to follow this dictionary and we're going to cut down all the words, and somebody else on the team is saying, oh, we're following a different dictionary and we really need to make this sound more academic and build up the content. You can't have teams doing that. Everybody needs to be focused in the same direction to persuade the other people. See, now we're both looking in the same direction, but the mouse still doesn't like it because he feels we look dishonest because we're not looking straight. Some people are impossible to please. Now we're looking in the same direction, but he doesn't like our facial expressions. This mouse is extremely picky. And then we say, no, we're looking out for your highest goals. We're both looking up. So maybe we gave him glossy brochures and we gave him all of our best ideas and we think our package looks great. But if it doesn't look great in the way that he wants to see, it's not persuasive. So then it's just a waste. So it can be a struggle to strike the right tone. So you really have to know who you're talking to when you want to persuade and when you use the words to persuade. So this is a little point. I would love if anybody has anything to say about that cultural aspect of persuasion before we go to the next section. And another thing of researching the client is an instantaneous kind of research. You just look at the other person's body language. And if you want them to be on your side, you do exactly what they do. So that works for dating. It works for business meetings. It works for Zoom calls, I suppose. See, we're all sitting here in the same position. But does anybody have anything to add about cultural things about persuasion? No, just listening. Okay. So the next thing sorry, my laptop is going around. So the next thing is interesting is the Greek rhetoric theory of persuasion. So Aristotle laid out 4 principles that he think are essential for persuasion. So ethos is credibility or authority. So that's again what I did when I pull out the Forbes magazine, or you pull out a university expert or a study, then you're using authority or credibility. It matters who you are. So if it was just, I did an experiment in my kitchen, it's not as impressive as if we say Princeton University or Cambridge University. Pathos is the emotions and interests that somebody has around an issue. So we want to talk about the benefits to the person that we're trying to persuade. And we want to talk about the feel-good aspects and the pride that people have. So especially with pride, if you're trying to convince men in business, if you could make them feel proud, like, oh, if you wear Nike outfits, then you'll be much more fancy than all the other people. Then a lot of people will go for that, right? If we look at the clothing industry, it's all about pride. And so they feel an emotion when they wear certain brand names, or you have to have an Apple Watch just to be part of the crowd. That's pathos. Logos is reason or logic. So this is, again, the credentials of the person who's doing the reasoning is good. So if you can cite well-known, people often cite Einstein, or, people that they find very lofty and important. If you say something was said by Gandhi, I know in North America anyway, everybody respects that. So then they'll listen, or they'll at least believe that it's true anyways. Time and appropriateness is the 4th thing. So sometimes, even if you are the perfect person for the job, everybody would want to have you. You have the best logic and reason, and everything about you is perfect. If the timing is wrong, you're still not going to succeed. So this is, especially, of course, in the book industry, book publishers, sometimes the perfect books get rejected because there's no room on the list. The perfect person gets rejected because there's no seat at the table. Sometimes there's nothing you do wrong. You do everything right, and it's just not the right time. Then you just have to accept it. So now another important thing about persuasion is when you use plain, clear language, people do not notice or think about whether you're using their language. So I wrote that kind of shortly. So if we go back to this, for example, sometimes people think if I use big words, so if we look at pathos here, right? If you use big words, people will feel the emotion of confusion. And because they feel the emotion of confusion, they think you must be really smart. So sometimes people try to write obfuscatory, confusing text just to try to sound more credible or more authoritative. And we've actually found with studies that the more experience you have as a scientific writer or as a writer, the more simple and beautiful your text gets, because you have the pride and the solidity behind you that you don't need to fake it. So you just use good words and solid facts, and then you don't have to fake it. So plain language is actually better because people don't have the emotion of confusion. They will just get involved with your message. So an example that the president of the Plain Language, so just one second here. The president of the Plain Language Society in Canada, she uses an example of, if you're writing a document about a car, you're not going to give the same document to the mechanic as you'll give to the car owner. So if you want to make a document that's satisfying for both people, you have to write 2 documents, even though your topic is the same topic, the car, right? The mechanic needs to know a lot more technical detail. They know exactly how to access things and how to fix certain things, the type of wrench they need to know, the part that they need to order. A lot of the car owners might just want to know how to check the oil, maybe change the tires, and who to go to fix it. My son and I almost bought a mini, one of those very adorable mini cars. And we learned that that car is designed not to be fixed by the owner at all. You can't even change the tire. They just have these very expensive tires that if it gets flat, you take it to the garage and the garage will fix it. So this for a different kind of car owner than myself. I want to be able to fix it myself. So another example is academic researcher versus a high school learner. So researchers often want to see those more complicated words because they understand what they mean. If you throw a lot of complicated words at the high school learner and they're going to feel the emotion of confusion, a lot of high school learners would just quit. So you need to be careful also about the emotions that the style of language that we are editing is giving. So now this is, I think, the friendliest book in the world that I know of. It's sold a lot of copies. How to Win Friends and Influence People. If you never read this book, it's usually about 97 cents on Amazon because the Dale Carnegie Association's just made it available to everybody. His main message, his very main message is consider the other person. So whether that's shaking their hand, remembering their name, talking about the things that interest them, that's all Dale Carnegie's messages. You can make anybody your friend. You can sell anybody anything if you're thinking about that person rather than your own needs. So he's one of the best persuaders that I know because he does it in a loving way, I think. So some people feel suspicious of Dale Carnegie, just like they feel suspicious of cats because his techniques are so successful. They think, oh, it's almost, he has too much power. He has too much power by using those techniques. Well, it's okay. It's okay to wield that power because he's giving people something that they want. So it's a positive thing for both parties in that case. And so here's a little quiz, and we need to answer in the chat. So language, what persuades? So if things have clarity, so as I said, the language doesn't confuse people. Also, if they're familiar, so that's what talking in terms of other people's interests. We're going to see some examples coming up. And also, we need things to be sincere. So people need to really, truly believe it. And so as an editing question, how could I make this list even more persuasive? Instead of saying clarity, familiarity, and sincerity, I'm going to wait to see if, oh yeah, the speaker would be happy to see you. That's true. You could turn on the video if you want. So how could this list be made even better? So we need clarity, familiarity, and sincerity. The people need to be, giving some pictures would be good. So sincerity is making sure that you're being honest and people really believe that you believe in your message. So classic thing is salespeople trying to sell products that they don't really believe in. They're not that persuasive. So you can sell things that you really believe in. That's true. Nobody has any answers. I'll give you that. Vivek has one. So as editors, you should see that this list is better. Clarity is clear. Familiarity is familiar. And sincerity is sincere. So to be persuasive, something has to be clear, sincere, and familiar. And actually, I didn't even notice this edit myself until I translated it into French. And then I'm like, oh, that can be much simpler. So that shows why, as editors, we have a job. Because even when you do things many times, you can always simplify. You can always make it more engaging. So marketers, it's a whole career just to sell stuff in our society. So they're expert at researching their audience and finding the most appealing and clear language that each particular audience wants. So if they're selling something to teenagers, they aim it differently than if they have baby boomers. So we're looking at this Visual Capitalist website. If you have your pen and paper, this is a good one to take a note of. Visual Capitalist offers many different interesting ways to present data, and to persuade people of things. And so this is an article that they put out about economic trends. I'm not that interested in economics, but this was an interesting thing because of how they're looking at the different generations. So they're saying millennials, which are now the largest generation in the workforce, are shaping society in their own image. And the expectation is that companies have an authentic voice and that actions align with words. So, there's a lot of talk about greenwashing, and companies will say, oh, we recycle, or oh, we plant trees. But unless millennials can actually see evidence of this, companies can't hide behind lies as easily as before. We have drones, we have the internet, we have reviews. So it's much more difficult to lie these days. And millennials actually want to see those actions carried out and not just promised. So when you see businesses lay down measurable targets and then take the additional step of tying those targets to compensation, that's when you start to see progress. So we've seen that talked about with, I think, the Google campus, and Apple employees are very vocal on social media about how they're being treated. And if people don't feel that their employees are treated well, like for Amazon, although Amazon's still growing out of control, but people aren't very happy about how they treat people. And so it's not as convincing, and a number of people, if they can buy something anywhere but Amazon, will try to. And brands have taken over the role of accelerating personal growth of their customers. So it's like a value-added way, rather than just saying they're going to do things like in the past. Now they actually want to see the companies doing things. So now here's a very interesting example of persuasion. Greta Thunberg has definitely changed governments in Europe and goals in many places. And yet, if you look at the United States and some people in Canada, they see Greta Thunberg and they just feel angry. They think, oh, she can't say anything. She's only a teenager. They try to discredit her. Oh, she makes me feel bad, right? Then they're trying to get the pathos argument. Oh, she gives us bad emotions, that girl telling us what to do. So why is it that some people find her clear, sincere, and familiar, and other people find her unclear, insincere, and unfamiliar? And I think it really just gets down to culture. So old white guys, so we're looking at clear, sincere, and familiar again. So old guys or old people that have not been reading the scientific research, they haven't looked at any graphs about climate change, they haven't looked at any papers about climate change. So when she says there's climate change, it's unclear to them and it's insincere, that it's unfamiliar. They think it's ridiculous that she's saying that because they haven't been reading the news. I think in Europe, people tend to read more science than Canadians. And so when in Europe, she says, look at the graphs, there's a problem, look at the data, it's familiar because everybody has been noticing the problem. It's sincere because everybody knows she's telling the truth. So it's clear because they're used to reading that scientific data. And so it's also showing, I call this the Greta effect, but it's not just Greta. But so environmental, social, and governance investment is increasing. So it says right here, environmental, social, and governance and climate funds have outperformed conventional funds throughout 2020 and are likely to continue to do so in 2021. So I'm from Alberta, which has the big oil sands, and there's a lot of resistance there to the idea of changing investment, but even there, the big oil companies are turning to greener technology. So obviously this argument is persuasive. So the green argument is persuasive to people who think, we might wonder, is there a way that we can persuade all those people who find science unfamiliar? I don't know. I would love to hear some opinions about that. But here's another example of, is science persuasive? And for a lot of people, it's not. So these two pictures, the first person, again, if you are reading scientific research and editing scientific papers, then the idea of vaccine trials is clear, sincere, and familiar to you. And so when people say, oh, we've got this new mRNA vaccine, you already know about mRNA, and it makes sense. However, the majority of people prefer to read on their telephones. And if they're reading on their telephones, they also probably prefer fewer words. And so this is kind of a new age problem that we've got, is that people only want to read a mem. So when you're trying to explain something like proper scientific trials, it doesn't fit onto a 20-word mem. And so the people that only want to read 20-word mems are completely unconvinced by real research, but the anti-vaxxers can come up with catchy slogans, and that's extremely convincing. So it says mes amis on the left side. I left it in French because I was fascinated by the situation of France at the beginning of the pandemic. All of my friends there, almost most of my friends there, were not going to get vaccinated. And one of my friends, she has almost no education, but she's a very darling person. And so she told me all these reasons. The first thing she said was that there had been a lot of errors in the laboratories and you couldn't trust the vaccines. So somebody in the media said there was errors in the lab, and she perceived that as there's errors with the whole entire vaccine process, which is not what the case was at all. But the way the media spins things and the way they use language convince people that one error means that the person on the toilet has just as good an opinion as the person in the lab, right? She also said Macron didn't get the vaccine. If Macron really thought the vaccine was good, he would have gotten it. And so that was an interesting argument to me. So she didn't believe it was valid because her leader hadn't had it. And I looked, and, you know, Justin Trudeau also hadn't had it, but Macron and Trudeau are younger people, and the older people were getting the vaccines first. So in Canada, though, I didn't hear anybody saying we can't trust it because the leader didn't get it yet. So I thought that was an interesting, point of credibility, though. And then we did see in some cases, like in the States, you know, it was more important to people, well, if the leader is going to get it, then maybe I'll get it. She also said, you know, politicians got COVID, so obviously they aren't following the rules, so why should I follow the rules? So again, it's that she wants the authority figures to do the right thing before she's going to do the right thing. And then she came up with another one, which I've heard elsewhere as well, which is that COVID was just the reason that they were vaccinating the old people first was because then you wouldn't notice how many people died because you could hide the deaths of the old people. She actually believed that. So again, somebody told her this idea and it just resonated with what she knew. So it was persuasive to her. It felt familiar. She could find that sincere. Another guy in France, in Paris, just an acquaintance, he was jumping up and down about the, liberté, égalité, I have every right to not be vaccinated. And I've heard that argument mostly from single men. They only feel my responsibility is important and they were feeling less responsibility to other people. I think a lot of family people understand their responsibilities to others better, perhaps. And then, there's this argument that I see all over the place that says, you're afraid. You're getting the vaccine because you're afraid. And it's like, no, I'm getting the vaccine because vaccines work. And then I can say, well, why aren't you getting the vaccine? Because you're afraid. But this is the problem, it's schoolyards, sort of almost like dogs just lunging at each other. You're afraid. No, you're afraid. So this is not a persuasive argument. And the difficulty that they're finding, and which is becoming more obvious as this goes on, the deeper somebody's belief is and the crazier it is, like the less logical it is, they're finding, the less we can use logic to persuade them to change their minds. So it's a really sticky problem. We have to go beyond the language to solve this. I know in some places they're trying to pay people to get their vaccinations. I don't know. Again, I'm really interested to hear what's happening in India with that. Here's another example of persuasion here. So this is a Facebook post. So Facebook, of course, is a huge part of persuasion in our modern society. So This, you don't have to read all that text, but the point is it's on a fasting group. So everybody on this fasting group already knows that they can have control of their own health. They know that they can control their diet, and they think highly, scientifically about their own health. So it says right away, she tells us her credibility. She says, I have been working on a COVID floor in a hospital since the beginning and had COVID myself. And the biggest common denominator in bad COVID is uncontrolled diabetes or undiagnosed diabetes. So then she starts going into cytokine storm ahead of time and inflammatory markers and all that. But, all this is logic, and all of that is received by her audience and persuasive to her audience because of who she's talking to. If we took this argument and put it on the person on the toilet's mem, none of this would be read, right? It doesn't matter how true this is, it wouldn't get read. So it only persuades some of us. So we have this situation that the people who are seeing COVID in the hospital are totally persuaded that it's terrifying. And then we have this situation that other people aren't wearing any masks, and they're talking about the economy, and they're talking about partying, and we can't seem to convince them. And I don't know if it's a matter of showing them more photos. A lot of the media in North America isn't showing people very many photos of what COVID actually looks like in the hospital. So it'd be interesting to see if we ever persuade them or what's going to happen. So another angle on persuasion is someone like Dr. Martin Luther King, who gave the most persuasive speech of all time, many people say. I looked it up while I was making this presentation, and it's really inspirational to listen to it. It's on YouTube, or you can read it. And then this webpage, writersrelief.com, does a really nice analysis of 8 techniques that he uses in his writing, in his speech writing, to why it's so persuasive. So things like just saying the same thing over and over again. And you can see, if you go to that webpage as a little activity, and then you use the 4 Greek techniques, is it appealing to their emotions? Is it appealing to their logic? A lot of his, of course, speech writing is just appealing to emotions. And so using musical language, it just begins to feel sincere and familiar and comforting to people that way. And I think, I just want to know if I've persuaded you. I have some other things about Dale Carnegie I could put too, but I'm hoping that people will turn their cameras on and have something to say. So if anybody's still with us, do you think anybody else is here, Vivek? Or is it just the two of us?
No, we do have a lot of participants, and they will share their inputs and thoughts with you. Yes, Jyotirmoy, what are your thoughts?
So it's good more people are getting vaccinated now in India too.
I have still not got vaccinated.
You haven't?
No,
okay.
that's because I got what's it called? I got the corona 3 months back. So they said you can take the vaccine only after 3 months, something like that.
Some places they say that's your first dose. If you got corona, they say that's your first dose. Then you just get a second dose. In one of the European countries, I would still want to, I think, because now people are getting the third. Like in Israel, where everybody was vaccinated a long time ago, they're getting a third dose. So, yeah, it's interesting. Well, does anybody else have anything else to say?
Now, talking about, you said about looking people in the eye. I don't think in India we look people in the eye. It's something you said then. Yeah, here I think we're more like the Japanese. We like our hierarchy, so we bend down. But that's my impression. India's too large. So, yeah.
But Jyotirmoy, maybe she meant maintaining eye contact, not.
Yeah. True. But even here, do we maintain eye contact even in business or in office relationships? We don't. Or even when we are talking to clients. But this is my impression. We are generally hierarchical. It's just my view.
Yeah, if it's hierarchy, that it differs. But when we are talking to someone on an equal footing, we will definitely have eye contact.
Yeah, but it would be wrong. So it would be wrong if I just came into the boardroom and looked everybody in the eye. It would be a bit aggressive, right? Like, it's interesting.
I don't think in India it will be looked as aggressive. I don't know. That's my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting to talk about it. So it would be okay.
Yeah, I have no problem. But the only thing is, I grew up very shy, so I still find it very hard to change my ways. To look people in the eye. So.
Yeah, it's an intimate thing to do that. Then they're saying that's why Zoom makes people tired, because we're really close. Like, I would never stand this close to Vivek in person. Like it's really, French people would, but normal people, well, normal. In Canada we stand like 6 feet apart. You don't stand. They're saying is the Swedes, when they said social distancing is 6 feet apart, and they said, why do you make us stand so close together? I could have done some more parts on the editing. I thought people would want to tell me some more aspects about India, so I didn't make the presentation too long. Wanted to leave some time for conversation.
So what say? She says there's a gender aspect as well. I think I would like to hear more about it. If you can unmute and share your thoughts.
Okay. My pronouns are they, them, just putting that out there. In India, at least, the women are not encouraged to make eye contact. Women are told to look down. And that happens in workplace environment as well. So a woman would be perceived as coming off as aggressive or bitchy if she looks her male counterparts in the eye, or especially her male bosses in the eye. So that's something to think about in terms of discrimination in the Indian workforce.
I think there's aspects of that in Canada also, that people try to be submissive more sometimes. But should we still listen to that, or should we try to break? That's another question. Do people try to break it in India or not?
I mean, you get punished if you do, so. I'm sorry if I spoke over someone.
No, that's okay. I'm sorry. This is something related to this. I have worked in many companies in different. I worked in the airline industry. I worked in the publishing industry. I worked in in a travel office. I somehow don't see that I needed to be submissive, or I was not. I never felt that. Yes, in sometimes I may have been, not in the workplace. Not. I don't know. Maybe we've all gone through different.
Same for me.
Different. Thank you, Bharti. We've all gone through different experiences and different. We've worked at different places. But I don't think I have ever been told to look down, or or come off as aggressive. I have fought with my bosses. I have told them I've been very clear about what I wanted or what I didn't want, or so I don't know if that's true of. If you can generalize it and say that in India we are told to do this, or that is how we are.
I don't think we can generalize this.
Yeah, maybe some.
So my mother in Canada also told me to be submissive, and also told me to not appear smart, and also told me to look. So I know there's some people in Canada that still want women to do that, but I know that that's not everybody. So my mother also told me, oh, you should try to pretend you are more stupid. You shouldn't be acting smart. It's not good. And it's not,
Okay. Very unlike my mother, who's wanted me to. She's very scared that I go and fight everywhere. So just day before yesterday, I banged into somebody's car and she thought I was going to fight with them. So she came running to rescue me and avoid the fighting. But no, I don't know. I feel somehow I have never faced that situation. And my bosses, yes, they may not agree to what I'm saying, or they may not want me to say something, but I think it's all nature. In the end, it's all human nature, you know. There are men I have seen who don't like to fight or who do not want to be seen as aggressive, and there are women who. Jyotirmoy, you say what you want to say whenever you want to say it.
That's why I said I gave my point of view that there is. When I joined the workforce, I was absolutely submissive in the sense my bosses. There's no question of fighting with my bosses or something. I was like that. That was my nature. Yeah.
But this
And
is also,
and
you know,
I did
no.
find hierarchical spaces in whichever spaces I worked. I worked in basically in the journalism, and that's why I couldn't last very long in the regular workforce. I was kicked out of the office kind of space long before COVID happened.
No, my problem is I hate confrontations. I hate fighting. And it gives me a lot of pain because I'm scared. I'm generally scared of people, though it doesn't appear, and people actually take me to be arrogant. And it's actually quite the opposite. So you can imagine when I feel that of course people judge, you know, and it is to hide your insecurities that you may even try to portray yourself as very confident. But the thing is, anyway, I think this is persuasive communication.
Yeah,
So,
different.
uh, it's being opinionated, which I think people are scared. People are scared of people who have their own viewpoints and who are not yes men. Yes men, yes people. Let me not.
Yeah, it's true. They're afraid of people who have a vision and are going to go somewhere. Oh, we were just going to stay here. What are you doing? But then they also like to follow them. So it's good. That's good too. If you persuade them, that was the idea. You have to persuade them to follow you. I'm not good at that aspect too. I'm just good at arguing also.
Maybe that's why we like to write, so we don't have to face anybody and confront anybody and just say what we want to, you know, on paper, rather than actually talk to them and persuade them. And even in writing I've been but yeah, as far as being I feel a lot of people don't like negative writing. So, you know, this has come from many I get not angry, but for example, a simple thing like not wearing a helmet while driving. And I see that in Maharashtra, especially, people don't like a two-wheeler in India. People don't like to wear, you know, they don't think anything's going to happen to them. So, and being from a defense background, for us, it's instilled that you have to wear a helmet. Without a helmet, you can't even, you know, sit on a scooter or on a two-wheeler. So I would write an article and it would come off as maybe, you know, I don't know, a negative thing. So I don't know. So I've been told, you know, people only like to read with something which is very positive or not very, you know, you
So
should
maybe
preachy, but I don't preach. But yeah, I'm just saying whatever I want to say.
Maybe you can say positively. Many people got a broken head when they didn't wear a helmet. And so this is positively, sure.
Yeah, I actually wrote it as a very humorous article saying, why should I follow rules? You know, my head is, you know, that I sort of.
Yeah.
Did I
Yes.
offend? I don't know. Did I?
No, it's perfect. Yeah, no, and so then it's like you try to spin the emotion aspect of it. Like the logic is obviously on your side, but people still feel a negative emotion, even though they say, oh, you're being scientific, it's so negative. Like we often get that. Oh, you're quoting facts, it's negative. Like people often say that here. But if you just say, well, so like you said, you use humor, then
I did. Yeah. No, I was asking Vivek and Jyotirmoy, did I offend our other participant because she left?
I wouldn't know.
no.
Oh,
But I think persuasive writing, or I don't know, this persuasive kind of text, a lot the marketing and the PR guys certainly do encourage it. While journalism would be more critical, let's say, journalistic kind of writing, if not negative.
Yeah, see, people see criticism or scientific analysis as negative. If they're not the kind of person who likes to play with ideas, then
Yeah.
like Nirja was saying, like, oh, that's negative. No, it's not negative. It's just analytical. You know, some of us enjoy the analysis and others.
And if you don't accept the analysis, then it becomes negative for you naturally. And if you go along with the analysis, that could be.
For me, if somebody criticizes or says, gives a differing opinion, it would hurt for a while. Yes, I would say it would be, maybe it's the ego that gets hurt. And then you sort of get over it and you see it from the other point of view and say, yeah, maybe, you know, what they're saying is, you need to learn from it. It's
I am also that I reject it at the beginning and then I need some time, days.
Yeah. I have that. I do that very often.
I like you.
No, but I hope I did. Sorry, Vivek, would you be able? I don't know how to pronounce. When I said that I have not felt, there was another participant who was speaking before me. Bharti, you?
I think her name is Saoirse.
No, I
Maybe-
don't think
I
I don't think she would have felt offended. Like we all are just
No, you
expressing
didn't
our
say anything
opinion.
offensive.
I hope I didn't say anything offensive, or I just.
No.
No, I think it's all different points of view.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah, because she left. I mean, so I was wondering if I was right.
like she was speaking from a gendered perspective. It's like males are not supposed to be shy. Women are supposed to be shy. But I was always a shy guy.
I've
so
seen
much-
many boys. My boys are shy.
And so much so that, this is just, there were people when I was growing up who said I was gay. Now, again, that's another typification. Gay means they have to be a certain kind of behavior. So this is all,
Yeah.
Sort of.
Did I have my video off the whole time?
Yeah. Yeah.
I was gesturing and everything. I'm sorry. You should have told me, Vivek. I'm like, why can't I see myself?
But then that kind of labeling is there everywhere, I think. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Anyway,
So thank you so much, Christa, for listening, and and thank you for your
Thank you for your time.
Yeah, I mean, taking time out for persuading us to write better.
well, yeah, I didn't do too many details about the words because sometimes it's more about the feeling of it. Like we get as editors, we get so stuck in the words, and sometimes we just need to take a step back and look at the big picture. Like one time I was editing something for Health Canada and somebody had made cartoons that almost looked like they had like a Chinese kind of face appearing like a monster for a virus. And I'm like, oh, you can't make it a Chinese face on this monster. But they didn't think about it. They were just trying to be multicultural. In Canada, we're always trying to make different cultures, but not on the monster. No, you need to not do that. But sometimes you don't think about it until you step away from the words and look at things.
That's a good point, Christa, because I find sometimes with authors, when you're editing them, there are certain authors who are so confident of what they have written that they refuse to see it from our point of view. For example, if I feel that somebody's writing is very repetitive, or they use, so I would ask them, is this because you've done this deliberately to sort of give it a rhythm? You use the same words in a paragraph, but if it happens too often and you feel that it's not making sense, but they don't want to, want you to sort of intervene and tell
Change
them
it.
that it is not, to change it. They don't. So I think persuasive writing would help us there also, when you're trying to persuade authors to see the other point of view.
Well, and then Dale Carnegie really comes in. Actually, I should reshare again, because Dale Carnegie. Did you guys know Dale Carnegie also? You know him? Are you
I
nodding?
have that book, but I have not
Never
read
read him. Never read him.
it. I have
Okay,
not
well,
read the book.
here, let me close
I do
this.
have it though.
It's really good. Like he says, so for persuading the authors, like it says, well, first of all, don't criticize at the beginning, which of course our whole job is to criticize. So we have to start with number 2 with some praise. And so in the course I'm teaching, when I have one of the units is for them to review a paper, and I send it back if they don't put praise at the beginning. Like I always try with my clients to email something like, oh, this is such a fascinating topic, or like you can make something up. You don't have to be, it's better if it's sincere, but you always should give some praise, and then like he has chapters about all these topics. So arouse in the other person an eager want. So he talks about like how we persuade them to get excited about the change, and so when you become interested in them and you're smiling, that's also, so when we're typing just on paper, the way to smile, I think, is to say something useless about the weather. Like these small little things help to, or something about children or a pet or like anything, just to smile, like a sentence that smiles, and use their name. And so with research clients, it's very easy because they are happy to talk about their research. Sometimes I have a question about something about my client's research about nuclear in society or fish or something, So it's good to ask them and be interested in them, and then they become more willing to make the changes. But I think those people you were talking about that don't want to make changes are actually insecure. Like they come across as confident because they're afraid to appear unconfident. Like secure people can learn more. So in a way, I think we need to treat those overconfident people with like very soft hands, and be like, oh, you are very good. You're so good. And then we can get them more interested in making some changes. And he has other ones too. Like, he talks about the best way to get an argument. The best of an argument is to avoid it. And so he talks about different ways to get around arguing and like still win your point, and never say to somebody you're wrong. So this is another one. As editors, our whole job is to tell them they're wrong. So that, we have to finesse it by being friendly and putting in little smile words and saying, oh, well, this is how I would do it, or I make the same mistake. Those kind of things can help people to be more receptive to our message. And I always get my students to try to use some praise at the beginning and some interest at the beginning to try and, get the other person to be more receptive to our ideas. So that's just some thoughts I had about it. This guy is the most persuasive guy, I think. Even from an Indian standpoint, I think it would be interesting to read his book. I mean, if you read the original one, it talks, it uses gender language, he instead of they, or he, she, but that he's such a compassionate and interesting and kind man that even with the old language, I think it comes across as a very sweet sort of thing, sweet lessons, because he comes from a good place. So I try to persuade you to read this book. It's a good book for persuasion.
Popular book.
Thank you.
This
I try to read.
Yes,
sorry,
Bharti.
Bharti.
No, I just said thank you. I'll read. I have the book.
Yeah. Well, and you can just read one chapter on the toilet. It's good.
Yeah, I know it's a very small book. It's been lying for decades in my dad's house. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a
I have
good
a
book.
question. It's become, I get very confused nowadays about how to use pronouns for people nowadays.
Yeah, in Canada, I think we decided that they is considered singular and correct.
Yeah.
Nothing like
If you
that in India.
know, like instead of he, she, now we would say they, and definitely instead of he. But if you know the person is he, or you know the person is she, and you know that they don't mind being called he or she, that's why people put it on their LinkedIn now, I guess. So
Yeah, so I think in non-fiction and technical writing, using they would be fine, and it reads fine. But I would say probably in fiction, it could be using they, might be, probably using he or she might be more, I don't know, depends on what the text is. Non-fiction, they works very well. They works very well. I've worked on texts like that, and and non-fiction means, general technical work also.
How do you use that day? Like how do you say?
So I can't. It's difficult to form a sentence just like that. But it's like when you are referring, you know, uh,
so
we
instead
refer.
of
Yeah,
he took the action, saying she took the measurement, you can say they took the
they,
measurement.
they, yeah, exactly, exactly.
Okay, well, that means two people, but now people accept that that can mean one person to say they like that.
In India, we are not used to that.
We're not used
So
to
if
it in Canada either, but we are
Yeah.
beginning to, we decided as a society that it's more correct. So we're trying to become used to it.
if you're writing on LinkedIn, for example, or you're writing a content writing content, you're a content writer. You're writing for websites or a blogger. I don't know how in India. How do you tell people? How do you say that they? Because everybody in India, everybody's English is not that good.
No,
For
Neerja,
them,
I guess for this you can resort to Merriam-Webster's. You can just ask them to, if they don't understand what you're trying to say, you can just ask them to refer Merriam-Webster's dictionary. Maybe. Just give the link to them. They can,
Has an article about they.
yeah, I think so, yeah. Although I have not read it, I've just seen the title, I guess. It
So
is,
pursue them by using credibility, in other words, throw the authority at them.
yeah, exactly. I mean, for people who find it very difficult to accept that.
you can do that with your authors, I suppose.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, like, when you're writing an article and it goes out on. Sorry. I've got some work going on here, so this is very noisy. So you're writing an article and you put it out on social media. You can't tell them, that why am I using they, and they'll get confused. And in India, they'll say, okay, when I use they means there are more than two people or three
No,
people.
I think in India you can still stick to he or she.
That's what I'm saying. Should we?
But a lot of the Gen Z, I mean, if you see Twitter, Nirja, a lot of our kind of community, the Gen Z members of the community, they are already starting this. And if you see the Twitter thing, they'll write he slash she.
I know.
They. So I
One of my
presume see
sons,
that. Okay.
he was a French tutor.
Hmm.
He writes they them. So I've always been very confused. I think Vivek, if we could have a class on this, because I
This is
really don't
actually
understand.
part of
still
the.
confused. I'm still confused.
And also, it's since you were saying, Vivek, we need a talk on diversity stuff that's happening a lot in the US and Canada. But there, it's probably our diversity questions would be even broader. How to handle diversity, how to be that sensitive reading, sensitive writing in Indian context would be even different. I think could be an interesting space where we can just have a general gupshup between the community itself. Known, like Nirja brought it up today. This is interesting. This is something one does think of. So a general discussion on this, not really a presentation, but we raise these things that are coming up on the and then we have a chat.
People could bring it.
Yeah. It's
Sure,
just a
sure.
side.
So thanks, Christa. I know you have to go for your other
I have to go to
meeting.
now, yes. To here in
Thank you,
Australia.
Christa. Thank you.
Thanks,
I
thanks a lot. Thanks a lot to the other participants. We will
Thank
see
you,
you
Vivek.
next. Yeah, we will see you next week at 4 p.m. with our interview series Take Wing. Interesting conversations, and Ganesh will be talking to Dagny Soul for that conversation. Please join us at 4 p.m. and have a nice day and a nice weekend. That's all for today.
Thank you, Krista. Thank you, Vivek.
sorry
Thank you
I
for
had
joining.
off. I didn't know. Okay.
That is
Bye.
exactly.
Thank you all.
Bye, Bharti.